In this week's Bizline, Vietnam set for robust economic growth according to Amber. And later on, Vietnam and the Netherlands, 50 years of cooperation and development. Hello there, you're tuning into Bizline, our weekly economic journal on VTV International. I'm Hoàng Hằng, and as usual, we now take a look at news making headlines in Vietnam's economic scene this week.
The ASEAN Plus 3 Macroeconomic Research Office, or AMRO, expects Vietnam's GDP growth to reach 6% in 2023 and rebound to 7.1% next year, as stated in its annual report, which was made public on Thursday. AMRO's economist affirmed that Vietnam is among the countries with the highest economic growth in the region and is attracting considerable FDI. Stable domestic consumption, a stronger service sector, and increased public spending and investment will be the driving forces behind Vietnam's economic growth this year. In addition, the country is expected to make even more positive strides in the second half of 2023.
According to the General Department of Customs, the total rice export turnover in the first quarter of 2023 reached more than $900 million, with more than 1.7 million tons of rice, up more than 19% in volume and more than 30% in value over the same period last year. This is a positive sign for Vietnam's rice industry. The output of exported rice is mainly concentrated in the provinces of the Mekong Delta, while the output from other regions is mostly used for domestic consumption. According to the Vietnam Food Association, the forecast for rice exports will continue to be favorable. In the short term, rice prices will be maintained at a good level due to global economic and political uncertainties that have increased the need for food reserves. This factor will help rice businesses benefit in the time ahead.
The first quarter's labor force, employment rate, and average monthly income of employees continued to rise compared to the previous quarter in the same period last year. This result was highlighted at a press conference held to announce the labor and employment situation in the first quarter of 2023 on Thursday. The average monthly income of employees in the first quarter was nearly $300, an increase of 8.4 USD compared to the previous quarter and 27.3 USD over the same period last year. The average income of workers in urban areas is 1.41 times higher than in rural areas. The average income of workers increased in all three economic sectors, with the highest rise recorded in the service sector. The unemployment and underemployment rates in the working-age population both declined compared to the previous quarter and the same period last year.
Many airlines are increasing their flights for the upcoming holiday period from April 30th to May 1st in Vietnam. Currently, tickets for most flights have been sold, especially for April 29th and May 2nd. Vietnam Airlines and Vasco are planning to provide nearly 551,000 domestic seats, while Bamboo Airways is expected to increase their daily supply by 25,000 seats for domestic routes. By Travel Airlines is maintaining its current flight schedules and increasing the number of flights on popular tourist routes. Passengers are advised to use self-check-in procedures to save time at the airport.
Those are some highlights in Vietnam's economic scene. Up next, we will look into the ample opportunities to level up Vietnam-Netherlands trade and investment relations as the two nations celebrate 50 years of diplomatic relations this year. Hello, you're tuning into Bizline. I'm Hoàng Hằng. The Vietnam-Netherlands relationship is considered a typical example of a dynamic and effective relationship in all fields. The relationship between Vietnam and the Netherlands has grown over the past 50 years with an emphasis on agricultural cooperation, water management and trade. At this 50-year mark, Vietnam is in a completely different development position compared to when the two countries established relations. The Netherlands is currently the EU's largest investor in Vietnam. So first, let's review some of the achievements in the bilateral relations of the two countries.
The relationship between Vietnam and the Netherlands has developed and built over the past 50 years, with emphasis on agricultural cooperation, water management, and investment. Vietnam and the Netherlands signed 2 strategic cooperation agreements in 2010 on sustainable agriculture and food security in 2014. And in April 2019, during the visit of Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte, Vietnam and the Netherlands upgraded their relations to a comprehensive partnership. The two countries have signed development cooperation agreements such as the DRIVE program for the infrastructure sector, the Niche program for education, or the OKP program for the water and agriculture sectors.
Thời gian đầu, quan hệ hai nước là cái kiểu giữa nước cung cấp viện trợ và nước nhận viện trợ. Thế nhưng mà ngày nay cái mối quan hệ này nó thay đổi rồi. Việt Nam và Hà Lan trở thành đối tác toàn diện. Nó được thiết lập dựa trên cái cơ sở là hai bên cùng tôn trọng lẫn nhau và vì lợi ích của hai nước. Cho nên nó đã phát triển trải qua những thăng trầm của lịch sử thì nó phát triển rất tốt và đưa hai nước đạt được rất nhiều thành tựu.
It can be said that very few countries in the world have a long-term and effective relationship like Vietnam and the Netherlands. When the Netherlands started to establish relations with Vietnam, it can be said that Vietnam has not developed as explosively as it is now. The Netherlands is currently the EU's largest investor in Vietnam and ranks 8th out of 141 countries and territories investing in Vietnam with 409 valid projects with a total registered capital of $13.7 billion.
To learn more about the comprehensive relationship between the two countries as well as cooperation in various fields, we have invited to our studio Mr. Christoph Prommensberger, Charge d'Affaires of the Dutch Embassy in Vietnam. Well, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Now, in general, how do you assess the relationship between Vietnam and the Netherlands since the establishment of the diplomatic relation 50 years ago?
Well, it has continued to grow over the past decades, and it has become a very multifaceted and interesting relation in many different fields. I think when 50 years ago our diplomatic ties were first established, there was a huge difference in development, and therefore in the first decades we mostly had a development cooperation relationship from which, for instance, the Hanoi Amsterdam School for the Gifted was originated, and various eye hospitals, water infrastructure projects, etc. And over the years our relation has continued to develop together with the development pace of Vietnam. And I would say that we now have a very multifaceted and balanced relation based on mutual interest, trade and investment.
Now, in terms of trade in particular, what have been the most outstanding achievements between the two nations?
The biggest growth that we have seen in our bilateral trade was actually in the past year. It was 33% growth of our bilateral trade, mostly thanks to growing Vietnamese exports to the Netherlands. So we are now still the second trading partner of Vietnam in Europe. And the total value of our trade is $11 billion in 2022, of which more than 10 billion actually are Vietnamese exports to the Netherlands, making the Netherlands the 6th largest export market of Vietnam in the world.
What are the top commodities for trade, for trading activities between the two countries?
Well, we see a lot of electronics and machinery being exported from Vietnam to the Netherlands. And apart from that, also a lot of agricultural products, so fruits, vegetables, fish, shrimps, etc. But also recently a very strong growth in coffee and cashew nuts. I think the export of cashew nuts from Vietnam to the Netherlands doubled in the past years.
On the other way, do we see a lot of products from the Netherlands to Vietnam?
Yes, the Netherlands mostly exports to Vietnam also agricultural products and machinery, high-tech equipment, and a lot of equipment that is being used to upgrade Vietnam's agricultural sector in particular.
The Netherlands is currently the EU's largest foreign investment partner in Vietnam with 409 valid projects with total capital of 14 billion US dollars. Many large Dutch enterprises such as Heineken, Unilever or De Heers have considered Vietnam as their home ground in Asia. So can you give some assessment about Vietnam's investment environment as well as reasons why Vietnam attracts so many Dutch enterprises with the number far ahead of other EU countries?
All the CEOs of the Dutch companies active in Vietnam tell me is they love to work with the Vietnamese people. Most Dutch businesses like about the Vietnamese workforce is the capability to take ownership, responsibility and initiative. To give you an example, I don't know if you are familiar with the Heineken silver beer, but that was actually invented and developed in Vietnam, originally for the Vietnamese market only, but now Heineken is selling it globally. And that is an illustration of the initiatives that are being taken in the Vietnamese market that can be expanded to the global market. And that is really thanks to the innovative nature of the Vietnamese people. And that's what many of the Dutch companies really like. For the larger companies, they have set up their operations here and they do have the reserves and the staff and the knowledge to work within the regulatory system of Vietnam. But what we do see is that the number of SME companies investing in Vietnam is lagging behind. Dutch economy, just like most of the European economies, are SME economies. And if you want to have a dynamic economic relation with a lot of innovation and new developments, you have to facilitate market access of SMEs. So there's still some work to do, but we think that the quality of the dialogue with our Vietnamese government partners on this issue is very good.
According to data from the General Department of Customs in the first 2 months of 2023, Vietnam's coffee exports to the Netherlands market reached 7.42 thousand tons, worth 18.77 million US dollars. Up more than 93% in volume and 106% in value over the same period in 2022. The Netherlands is currently ranked 5th in the world in terms of coffee consumption. In 2022, the supply of coffee to the Netherlands is mainly from the EU countries, but the Netherlands' coffee imports from the non-EU countries also grow by double digits, of which Vietnam is the second largest source of foreign coffee for the Netherlands. Experts say that if small and medium enterprises want to penetrate the European market, the Netherlands is the favorable destination to expand to the market.
Regarding export, known as the leading transshipment of goods in EU and the world, the Dutch economy has been and is a reliable destination for the export of Vietnamese agricultural products to the EU. And according to recent data, Vietnam is the second largest coffee exporter to the Netherlands. So how do you rate these results, and also what do you think about Vietnamese coffee?
I love Vietnamese coffee. I have Vietnamese coffee 4 times a day. And I try all the different varieties from the different regions. Vietnam is particularly good, not in the Arabica, but what's the other?
Robusta.
The Robusta, exactly. Yeah. What is very interesting about the Vietnamese coffee sector is that it is slowly moving up in the value chain. So where in the past Vietnamese coffee typically used to be sold as at a commodity price. Now it is increasingly being sold as a high quality project associated with a particular taste, which is being produced in optimal circumstances, which has been processed in the best way, which has been produced taking into account also the environmental impact for production. And this is all very important to get access to more developed markets like the European market, where consumers pay a higher price for their coffee. So I think the story of the Vietnamese coffee is a very good illustration of the path on which many of the agricultural commodities in Vietnam could embark.
Regarding agriculture, the Netherlands not only has good infrastructure, but the speed of scientific and technological development in agriculture is also ranked among the top countries in the world, especially achievements in seeding and greenhouses. Cooperation with the Netherlands in this area is very evident in the Mekong Delta. The Mekong River Basin, including the Mekong Delta region of Vietnam, is facing unprecedented challenges due to the effects of climate change, the pressure of economic development requirements, and the rapidly increasing water use. As a result, Mekong water resources are being degraded in both quantity and quality. The Netherlands has also experienced many similar difficulties in the past, and gradually, the country has effectively adapted to the disadvantages of climate change.
Việt Nam và Hà Lan có những điểm tương đồng giống nhau, tức là cùng đồng bằng ven biển, cũng cùng chịu những tác động khắc nghiệt của thiên nhiên, thí dụ như nước biển dâng, thí dụ như là biến đổi khí hậu. Đất đai của Hà Lan không có nhiều, diện tích của họ chỉ bằng 1/8 của mình thôi. Thế nhưng mà họ làm được những điều rất kỳ diệu, là bởi vì nếu mà muốn có phát triển bền vững như vậy, họ phải đảm bảo được cái thứ nhất là về đê điều, quản trị tốt một tài nguyên nước, coi nó là tài nguyên thì phải quản trị rất tốt.
Recently, speaking at the 4th Mekong River Commission Summit on April 5th in Vientiane, Laos, Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh called for fair and reasonable use of the Mekong River's water resources, manage flows on the mainstream, prevent and limit negative impacts, especially on downstream countries. To effectively carry out this task, international cooperation is very important, and friends like the Netherlands are always ready to accompany Vietnam.
Now, in addition to trade, the Vietnam-Netherlands relationship is also reflected in many other areas, such as water management, and especially with many projects being implemented in the Mekong Delta region of Vietnam. So how do these projects have positive impacts on people's lives?
For the past decades, the Netherlands and Vietnam had a very strong cooperation relation, in particular on the Mekong Delta. Hundreds of thousands of citizens in the Mekong Delta have, thanks to Dutch cooperation projects with Vietnam, access to a clean and sustainable drinking water in the Mekong Delta. So that has been very much the agenda that we've been working on in the past decades. What we focus on in our water cooperation in the Mekong Delta with Vietnam for the coming decades is mostly on addressing the effects of climate change, and then in particular with nature-based solutions. As you know, the Netherlands is, just like Vietnam, a delta country, and in the past decades we have learned to try not to fight against nature, but to live with nature. And that means that in your water management and in your coastal protection, you have to try to make use of nature-based solutions. So that also means that if the water is rising, you do not try to build every time a dike that is 10 centimeters higher, but maybe you have to create areas where you can allow the water to intrude the land and keep it in a basin until it retrieves again. And for your coastal protection, actually in Vietnam there is the perfect solution of mangrove forests, because actually mangrove forests provide a very, very good coastal protection. It's nature-based. It is mangroves are perfect for storing carbon. So that means when you plant a lot of mangrove, you at the same time also address the root cause of climate change. And those mangrove forests can actually be used as breeding grounds for the aquaculture industry. So this is something that for the coming decades in our water cooperation with Vietnam that we are focusing on, and on which many of our knowledge institutions and businesses are already working with the governments, the provincial governments in the Mekong Delta, and also with the farmers and the businesses in the Mekong Delta.
Vietnam is building an innovative agricultural ecosystem for the Vietnamese agriculture to develop sustainably and without causing harm to the environment. And the Netherlands is one of the world's leading countries in this field. So what can Vietnam learn from the Netherlands?
I think we can still learn also a lot from each other. But we have this heritage of, in the past 50 years, starting sometime in the 60s, of developing our agricultural industry to become ever more efficient. As a result, the Netherlands, with a very small landmass, you can drive from the north to the south of the Netherlands in 3 hours. We are currently the second largest exporter of agricultural products globally, only after the US. So what we typically can bring to other countries, and which we're also bringing to Vietnam in our cooperation with farmers and businesses and governments and knowledge institutes in Vietnam, is the know-how of how to produce more efficiently, to have higher quality, and to put less stress on the environment at the same time. And that has to do with agricultural practices, but it also has to do a lot with how to use technology. It has to do with raising the knowledge base of local farmers, because all of them have great intentions, but they are not all familiar yet with all new farming techniques and technologies that they can use. So in our cooperation with Vietnam, we focus on developing that. The Netherlands is home to the most advanced seed development companies in the world, and several of them, they also have R&D centers in Vietnam. And what they do in these R&D centers, they develop crops that are perfectly suitable for the conditions in Vietnam. For instance, they are working on a rice crop that that is resistant to brackish water conditions, because particularly in the Mekong Delta we see a lot of saltwater intrusion, and that is currently destroying a lot of the rice production, because the current rice crops cannot handle brackish waters. So these companies develop rice crops that can handle those conditions. But we also develop all kinds of natural agents that can help to fight pests, because for the access of Vietnam to European export markets, it is very crucial that it limits the use of pesticides. We also have, for instance, in shrimp farming, we have a Dutch company, it's called Signify, and they develop special lamps. And if the shrimps are under these lamps for half of the day, they have a 50% smaller chance to develop certain diseases. And the survival rate of the shrimps is a lot higher. So in the end, the farmer can sell more of his produce to the international market, and he even doesn't need to use pesticides.
Now, how do you assess the prospect of cooperation between the two countries in the coming time, and through which specific projects?
I think there is a huge potential to be further explored, both in the field of agriculture and water. Those are our traditional cooperation areas. But I think our cooperation can develop strongly also in the field of the energy transition. As you know, both Vietnam and the Netherlands committed to become climate neutral in 2050, which is a monumental task. And I think for Vietnam it's even more monumental than it is for the Netherlands, because of the development pace of Vietnam and of the growth of the energy demand. So that means that there is a lot of work to do to develop the renewable energy sector in Vietnam. and to develop energy efficiency and energy saving, and to upgrade the electricity grid so it can handle all these new renewable energy sources. And for that, the Netherlands government has several grant schemes that can pay for up to 50% of each project, up to a total project value of 150 million euros. So that is very substantial. So we're talking about projects in the range of 300 million euros. For instance, in the field of the energy transition, that the Netherlands government could support in close cooperation with the Vietnamese government.
Once again, thank you, Mr. Christophe Promensberger, for being here with us.
My pleasure.
Half a century is an important milestone, and Vietnam and the Netherlands are now comprehensive cooperation partners with in-depth efficiency. Especially thanks to the support of the Netherlands, many economic and social fields of Vietnam have improved and even achieved many impressive milestones. And on that note, we wrap up this edition of BizLine. Stay with us for more content, or if you're on the go, feel free to download our app VTV Go from App Store and Google Play, or subscribe to our YouTube channel VTV4 Go. Thank you for tuning in, and until next time.